St. Louis Blues forward Oskar Sundqvist is facing a hearing with NHL Player Safety after a nasty hit last night on Bruins defenseman Matt Grzelcyk in Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Finals. In today's video, we're going to take a look at what happened in last night's game, analyze the hit, and discuss what might happen next if he's going to be suspended. And that's coming up next. Welcome back to Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So last night's action of the Stanley Cup Finals battling between the Boston Bruins here and the St. Louis Blues ended up with the St. Louis Blues winning an overtime game 3-2 and tying up the series 1 game apiece, heading back to St. Louis for games 3 and 4 coming up here in a couple days' time. Meanwhile, the St. Louis Blues may end up with a different lineup come Game 3 as forward Oskar Sundqvist is having a hearing for a nasty hit on defenseman Matt Grzelcyk last night and very well likely will find himself suspended for at least a period of time. Now, if you're not sure what happened or you haven't seen the play, I'm going to show you here in a clip, and there's 2 different angles to see what exactly went down. Now, on that play, he was called for a 2-minute minor penalty. I know many people thought it should have been a major penalty, and I guess you can leave your comments down below in the comment section here what you think now that you've had a chance to look at it. Do you think a minor penalty was okay, or do you think it should have been a major penalty, and how do you think that'll impact the potential suspension? I know the call on the ice usually does have an impact, and the other big factor here is the injury to Grzelcyk. Grzelcyk did end up leaving the game, did not return, and I do feel that that hit had a fairly significant impact on the remainder of last night's game. Now, at that point, we had a 2-2 game. There was a lot of goals in the first period. After that, both teams kind of settled in, had a much better defensive effort. There was lots of hitting. There was a very physical game, and nobody else scored until we got to overtime when Carl Gunnarsson put in the overtime winner for the St. Louis Blues. Now, obviously, that did have a big impact, as I said, meaning that the Bruins were down to 5 defensemen, so they were obviously playing a man short on the blue line. All of the Bruins' other 5 D-men obviously had to pick up the slack and play more minutes. And in that type of action where it's so physically demanding in the finals, where they're basically beating on each other quite a bit here, that certainly was quite taxing for them and certainly had an impact, I believe, in their overall energy and their overall play here, which could have resulted in a potentially different outcome. Now, obviously, the referees felt this was a 2-minute minor penalty, but I think there is an argument to be made here that it probably should have been a 5-minute major in a game misconduct. The other part about this that I think there is an argument that there is some intent is if you take a look at how Sundqvist is coming in, his natural path would have had him hitting him on the right side, but instead he kind of turned a little bit, hit him on the left where the head was exposed. So I do think this does look bad. I can't say with absolute certainty that Sundqvist definitely was trying to hit him in the head. A lot of it had to do with the awkwardness of how Grzelcyk was going into the boards there. However, I do think it's fair to say that there was enough time for Sundqvist to either go into a more natural way and get him on the right side where he likely wouldn't have had as much head contact, probably more so in the shoulder, or he could have changed his path or tried to stop a little bit better here and maybe avoided that head contact altogether. So either way, I do think Sundqvist is going to be facing a suspension. Now, normally they do weigh playoff games to be worth more because they're such valuable games, especially in the finals here. Obviously, you know, every game is of utmost importance to get them either further or closer to winning the Stanley Cup. So I don't think it's going to be too long. Sundqvist doesn't really have a history of being this type of player. I think sometimes in the playoffs when things get ramped up and there's so much energy on the ice and there's so many big hits going, sometimes players just get a little bit carried away here, and I think that might be a case of what happened in Oskar Sundqvist's case. Now, he knows what it's like to be on the receiving end of a dirty hit. I mean, he is one of Tom Wilson's victims from not that long ago, where he was basically KO'd on the ice, and he knows what it's like to deal with concussion symptoms, and he knows what it's like to be on the receiving end. So I don't really label him as a dirty player, but I do think he made a bad decision, a bad choice here, and unfortunately it does look bad that he kind of had an idea what he was doing, especially based based on that second angle. So I'm not a fan of this hit. This is not the kind of thing we want to see in the NHL. I do expect these two teams to be going at it really hard in the Stanley Cup Finals, but there is a way to do that and still keep it clean. Like I said, this had a fairly big impact on the game. Grzelcyk certainly proving to be a very valuable defenseman for the Bruins, a good puck mover back there, certainly playing a fair bit of minutes, and to have all that extra time played by the other defensemen certainly wears them down faster. So overall, you want to be physical on the other team to wear them down. That's what we saw the Blues do to the Sharks, except they didn't really have any incidents there like this, but they wore them down, they beat them up, and they were just too big and too physical, and by the end of it, San Jose had a lot of injuries and just couldn't keep going anymore, and the Blues were able to take over and win. And right now, things are looking like it could possibly go in that direction again, but the Bruins are certainly a more physical team and keeping up with them better in that respect. There's still plenty of action left in this series. It's really tough to call. I do think these teams are very evenly matched in many ways. We certainly saw in Game 1 where the Bruins were kind of going into the Blues crease a little bit more often, trying to mess with Bennington a little bit. And then, of course, they responded last game. There was certainly more action of the Blues going into the crease to get at Rask. So there's certainly a lot of physicality going on in this series. But hopefully we can kind of keep it clean the rest of the way. But I wouldn't be surprised if Sundqvist is a 1 or 2 game suspension where he doesn't have a history in one Stanley Cup final playoff game. Is probably equivalent to about 3 or 4 regular season games. I would think that it's probably just going to be the one game. But let me know what you think down in the comments section. Do you think he's going to be suspended? What do you think is fair? Do you think the call on the ice should have been different? Let me know your thoughts and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams and there is plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So subscribe for more videos just like this one and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.